I think it was a couple of weeks later, actually, here at Barry Conrad's studio here in Studio City. A friend of ours was with us, Gary Bain. We receive a frantic call from Jackie Hernandez down in San Pedro, and she is in trouble. There's things being thrown at her. They're seeing all kinds of strange lights. All hell is breaking loose. So I tell Barry right away, I said, let's load up the equipment and go down there. Now, people are probably going to wonder, why would I want to go down there a second time? Well, once you start on a case like this, you want to follow through and see what you can learn. I was that excited about the case, actually, that we took off, went down there, and I was a little bit uneasy about going in the house, and even probably more uneasy about going up in the attic again, but I knew that we had to go up there just to see what was going on. Maybe I could capture some more lights, whatever. We're walking around the attic, looking around just to check to see if there's anything unusual, if there's anything that had been moved or displaced, anything like that. We're walking around looking, and Barry Conrad is down below, downstairs, and Gary Bain goes near the attic opening, and he's talking with Barry Conrad, and Barry says something like, I think there's some things going on down here. So I looked at Gary and I says, well, there's not much happening up here. Let's go downstairs. And I remember at that point, I took one step. Gary was looking over to Barry. He was downstairs. Barry said something about, I think there's some noise or something happening down here. And I looked to Gary and I say, I don't think there's much happening up here at all. Let's go downstairs. At the moment I said that, I took one step. And that's all I remember until Gary's looking me right in the face, and for some strange reason, I'm pulled over to the side of the attic. There's something around my neck. I don't know what it is. And he helps me off of this nail. Whatever is around my neck is hooked on a nail. I was pulled over to the side of the attic. I don't remember, there's a space of time in there that I lost. Everything went black. I don't remember being lifted up there. But I was actually hung. I was hung in an attic. And as it turns out, there was a clothesline around my neck. When we went downstairs later, I remember seeing the red marks on my neck. It was actually around my neck that tight. Gary took a picture. He actually had enough time to take a photo of me before he took me down. He had a point-and-shoot camera with him. I don't know what happened, but there was a point of time that I lost there. From the moment I took that step to the moment I'm opening my eyes and I'm looking at Gary right straight in the face. But it was more than that. It was that I was pulled to the side of the attic. I had this rope around my neck. As it turns out, it was a plastic clothesline, an old plastic clothesline, that we later found out was tied in a special kind of a knot, called a bowling knot. It was a seaman's knot. And this was an old piece of clothesline. It wasn't like it was fresh or it was new. It was kind of dried. It was yellow, I remember. And the funny thing about that is there was nothing on that attic floor at all. We had examined every square inch of that attic floor. There was nothing like a piece of rope or twine or clothesline on that floor. That's what was really strange.
And when you started coming out of the crawl space, out of the attic, and I saw was on the tape, what were you feeling at that point in time when your friends are helping you out of the crawl space and you still have it around your neck?
It's strange, but I don't even remember walking from the position that I was hung in to where I was going downstairs. All I could remember is that I had to get downstairs. I had to get out of that attic. I never went back in that attic again. I don't think I could go back down there today and go back in that attic for some strange reason. It just had such an impact on me. But I know I walked to the door. I went downstairs. I was frightened. I was shaking. I was really shaking.
Did you feel when you were tied up to the rafter, I heard you mention something about being pulled from your feet. Was there something about that?
I guess there was a real short period of time. It must have been so unbelievably brief. Probably sandwiched in between the time that I took the step and the point that I blacked out. It felt like someone was pulling me up. But it's funny, I don't remember anything around my neck at that point. The only time I remember something around my neck was after the incident was practically over, and here Gary's taking me off of the nail. There was an upturned nail, and this clothesline was hooked over the nail, and I was pulled right against that rafter. That's what I remember. But the strange thing is that point, that piece of time that just everything went black. I don't remember exactly what pushed me or lifted me. I don't remember mechanically what happened to my body or physically what happened to my body. All I know is that I ended up there, and all I know is I was glad to get down. Oh yes, the frame of time that this thing happened in. You know, the whole thing from the beginning to the end was probably only 30 seconds. But the core thing itself, the moment that I took that step and the moment that I see Gary in front of me, probably just 2 or 3 seconds at the top. And can you imagine just coming out of that dark space of time that I lost? I mean, I felt so out of control. I mean, here you try to rationalize, you know, what has happened actually. I'm pulled to the side of the attic and there's nobody up there, and I know that Gary's standing there, and you know, he has nothing to do with it. He's at a distance from me. I see the flash from his camera, I remember that. And I know he said something to me, but I don't recall exactly what he said. But here I try to rationalize this in my mind, and I just can't do it. It's that frightening. When you try to apply logic to this thing and try to rationalize and try to think it out, you just can't do it. It just boggles the mind. Because you're used to maybe something being there, or somebody pulling a hoax on you, or somebody's up in the attic, but nobody was there. There's just no way that any reasonable explanation can come up, except I was picked up, I was hung by something. It must have had some knowledge. It had some manner of picking me up and scaring me. And I don't think it was any electromagnetic force. And a lot of people say, oh, you were involved with some kind of electromagnetic force, and it did this and it did that. Does an electromagnetic force think? Can it reason? Can it pick you up off the attic floor? Can it put a clothesline around your neck? A clothesline that I didn't even feel go around my neck. But somehow it was there. Yeah, it happened just so fast. It was incredible. I was happy to get out of that attic.
Did you feel like your life was threatened?
I felt like my life was threatened at that point, yes. I really do. Where was I going to go with that? I was going to say something. You know, when I think about it now, I think, no, this thing really just tried to scare me, which is what I think, if this is a ghost, I think that's what they do, is they scare you. But at the time it happened, I thought, oh my God, this is the end. This is it. I'm done for. This thing could kill me. And I really felt at that time that it could have killed me. Now, there was another incident that happened later on up in Weldon, California, where I felt almost exactly the same way. It was the last major attack that this thing had on me. And I felt at that point that it could have possibly killed me. But it didn't. I suppose it might have had the power to do that. Yeah, you're right. That's right. One thing I want to make clear, and we get asked this a lot. I've been asked it many times. Do you think you were a victim of a hoax? Or was there someone in that attic? Or did someone pull the wool over your eyes? You know, I'd like to think maybe it was that, but it wasn't. We inspected every bit of that attic. It was a small house. It wasn't like it. It was an elaborate, huge house with all kinds of cavernous places and hidden trapdoors and things like that. It was pretty well cut and dried. Another thing you have to remember is that the woman who lived there had 2 small children. She didn't have a tremendous income. And I don't really think she'd have the knowledge to put together something like this to try to pull the wool over our eyes. It's much too elaborate for that. You know, people are accusing us of that, and I guess that's the easiest way to try to get out of it. But it's just not that simple. What we went through actually did happen. I can't explain it. I mean, there must be a reasonable way to explain it. You know, people think, you know, it's a fantasy, or it's something that was carried out, or it was a big hoax that was pulled on us. No, I don't think so. We would have seen that. We would have noticed that. It just isn't true. Yes, there were 2 of us in the attic. That's true. Gary was right in front of me all the time. So it wasn't like he was pulling the thing off, or like we were trying to do it together. I mean, I guess people could accuse us of trying to pull some kind of a hoax together. But I think if you listen to Gary, you listen to his recorded interview, he's an awful, serious, analytical person. He was one of the most analytical persons we had down there that was trying to explain this thing in a very rational way. And what you do as a researcher when you go into something like this is you try to eliminate all the possibilities. Could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be electromagnetic or some kind of magnetic energy from the power lines up above? That's always some of the first things that you eliminate. And once you've eliminated all these things and you end up with a hanging like this, it just doesn't measure up. But it actually did happen. We were sitting in Weldon at a table with a Ouija board on the table, and we're playing this thing. And this is the last major incident that really happened to me. We're playing this thing, and we're asking it questions. And all of a sudden, you asked me earlier about the size of this thing. Let me tell you about the size of this thing. It hit me so hard, it picked me up out of a chair. Barry Conrad, the cameraman, is sitting right across from me. If we'd only had this thing on tape. But there again, this was another incident where it killed a video camera, and we also had a backup audio cassette recorder trying to record the sound portion of what was going on, and we play this back and there's nothing on it. But anyway, getting back to the size of this thing, the immensity of this thing, this is what really hit me at this point. I felt like I was hit by a huge boxing glove. That's exactly what it felt like. I'm sitting in this chair at this table, if you can imagine, playing this Ouija board. All of a sudden, it felt like something was coming up right here at this point and striking me, lifting me up out of the chair and throwing me against the trailer wall. This was a small trailer, but when I hit that wall, I could just feel the trailer give. So I knew I hit this thing really strong. Barry Conrad sitting right there looking directly at me.
How far away from the wall were you sitting?
I was sitting, I guess, about 2.5 feet from the wall. It was behind me, about 2.5 feet. So if you can imagine, it picked me up out of the chair and threw me that far against the wall and then dropped me on the floor. Barry had to come over and pick me up.
Did you go unconscious?
No, I don't think, no unconsciousness at this point. There were several witnesses in the room. I know I had to get out of the trailer quickly. I left the trailer, I got out of there. But the strange thing about this whole thing is once I was outside the trailer, it felt like there was something that was compelling me to go back in there. I don't know what it was, But I felt like, I mean, everybody else was even telling me, you know, you look strange. There's something weird about you. And I felt like, I kept looking at the trailer and I felt like I have to get back in there. I have to get back in there. And I'm not sure why. But I felt compelled to get back in there for some reason. Once we got back in the trailer, it seemed like I was okay for a while, and the place was real cold. And it was so cold in that trailer that we had to light a fire. And we stayed there all night, of course. But it was freezing cold in that place. You know, people have asked me, you know, do you think this thing was huge? Do you think it was powerful? Do you think it could have killed you? And like I had mentioned before, yeah, I think, especially during the hanging, I felt like it could have killed me. That's right. As far as power, oh yes, it had power. There's no question about it. And I felt that in Weldon. That's where I really felt it, when it knocked me out of that chair. It was like a massive force hitting me from the front, lifting me up out of a chair. If you can imagine lifting me up a couple feet and then throwing me 3 feet behind, my back against the trailer wall, rocking the trailer wall, because I felt the trailer wall give. And I know a wall and a trailer can give quite a bit anyway. But still, that takes quite a bit of force to bring you up out of a chair against a wall. And right then at that point, I felt the force of that thing. And I felt the power of it. And it was a guided power. It wasn't like it was some kind of electromagnetic energy, you know. I wish we'd have had this thing on tape. And if the camera wouldn't have failed on us, if the power wouldn't have been taken out of the camera, we'd have had this thing on tape. But you know, even if we'd have had it on tape, somebody would have accused us of rigging the thing, like they always do. There's just no way around that. They have to believe us. They have to believe this. It's true. It happened.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the light phenomena that happened the night of the hanging incident?
Barry recorded some tape after the hanging incident downstairs, and there were several people in the room. We never noticed anything around us that night in terms of pieces of light or corpuscles of light, whatever you want to call it. But when we get back to the studio and we look at the tape and we slow it down, there's definitely all kinds of light activity behind me. And a lot of people have accused us of that, of being insects and one thing and another. But it's too bright for that, and it's too fast for that. But yes, there's a lot of light. There was a lot of light around me that night of the hanging. And it seems like whoever the activity centered upon, light seems to be around them. In other words, if we interviewed Jackie and we get back to the studio, we look at the tape, there's always pieces of light floating around in back of her or around her. There seems to be an energy source, some kind of energy. Where it's getting that energy, we don't know, but it is creating light, and we have recorded it on tape. And as far as I know, it's the first time it's really ever been done. We've had a lot of people look at the tape, and they just cannot explain it. I remember the night I came down from the attic. We were standing in the kitchen, I believe it was, and I started to talk about what I had felt up in the attic, what had happened. And that's the night that Barry has on tape. And if you look in the background, you can see corpuscles of light flying behind me through the frame, through the doorway, if I remember right. But the energy was definitely there. There's no question about it. And it always seems to be centered around people who have just encountered some kind of phenomena. After the hanging incident, that night we were standing downstairs talking about what had happened upstairs, what I had gone through, and Barry's recording this on tape, and you can see pieces of light flying above my head right on the tape. And I think he even slowed it down. You can see it in slow motion as well. I remember very well the night of the hanging. We were downstairs talking about what had happened upstairs, and Barry's got this on tape. You can actually see these corpuscles of light, or darts of light, going above my head and behind me. And so it kind of correlates a little bit to what was actually happening in the attic. There's this energy around whomever seems to be involved in whatever's happening at the time. Within a few minutes of the hanging incident upstairs, we were standing downstairs, all of us. Barry's got the camera on his shoulder, the video camera, and all of a sudden I look at him and he's like almost ready to fall over. He's like wavering. The camera's way over on its side and he's almost ready to fall. And somebody says, grab him, he's going to fall. And it's just like he was just all of a sudden, everything was just taken out of him. He was just going to faint. Fortunately, he came out of it. He was okay. He didn't fall. But it's strange that this happened just like, 4 or 5 minutes after we had come out of that attic. He has never fainted on any shoot whatsoever. No, he never has any trouble that way. He's used to handling a camera for hours on end, doing a lot of handheld work, so it wasn't like, he was overexerted or anything like that. The temperature there wasn't hot or anything, so that shouldn't have bothered him in any way. It just seems really odd to everybody that it happened at that point. It seems to correlate with some of the things that were happening that night, I guess. We continued on with the case. We followed Jackie up to Weldon, California. Whatever it was not connected with the house, but it must have been connected with her because it followed her up there. The first night we were up there, we remember looking around in the backyard. There was a little metal storage shed. And I remember seeing shadows in that thing, very, very first thing. And I tell Barry we should probably set up a camera to keep it constantly running. He was roving around with his camera, capturing interviews and other things that we needed. But I took my camcorder and I tied it down to a tripod, which I set in front of the building. Now, I've been doing photography for a long time, and when I set up a camera on a tripod and I frame it in a certain position, it's going to stay there because I lock it down. When you have an expensive camera, you don't want it falling forward or falling backwards, so you lock it down. And when I framed it right directly into this shed because we had seen some strange shadows there, and I thought, well, let's leave it run.